Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video. Today we're going to do a character guide on Dark Knight Cecil. So typically what happens when these banners come out, it's going to get to the point now where a lot of these rerun characters I already have guides on. So most of the time what happens is these side characters come and I'll just make like a YouTube post saying, hey, here's my guide from before, the character hasn't really changed. Because typically when these characters come back with just force enhancements, like their kit doesn't change. So you can just watch my C90 video of them, right? Well, I was looking through my backlog and I never did a video on Dark Knight Cecil. So here we go, my first character guide on Dark Knight Cecil. So if you guys ever notice like a side character come out and I don't have a guide on my channel, like let me know and I'll get a guide made. There are some characters that fell through the cracks that I just never made a guide on. Part of it is just that like they maybe came out when I wasn't like doing a guide on every single character, or I maybe didn't have their kit at the time and I didn't make it, right? Could be something like that. So since I don't have one on Dark Knight Cecil, I'm going to make a new one. Now, Edge, on the other hand, I already do have a guide for him, so I did make a YouTube post posting Edge's guide. But typically, if you ever want to find my guides, if you just type in the character's name and then like Joe Wags in YouTube, it'll probably come up right away, right? So that's the way to check right away. Also on my channel, I do have a playlist with all my character guides, so you just browse my playlist and find all my character guides I've done, right? So anyways, in this guide, we're going to look at Dark Knight Cecil. We're going to look at his calls. We're going to look at the artifacts, the spheres, and then we'll do a quick little showcase on him and kind of see how he's looking there, right? So let's go ahead and start with the calls. Now, I do think there is some use in his calls. It's not like the craziest thing, but there is some use because of the LD, I would say. The 15 call is nothing crazy. It's literally just a dark attack that launches. That's all it really does, right? So nothing too crazy there. The LD, however, I do think is interesting. So it does put a Dark Imperil down on the enemies. But the big thing is it does do a 6-turn debuff that I think is actually very good. This debuff does do a 10% sap, and then an HP damage taken up plus 20%. It's not quite as potent as Kurisame's, but it serves the same purpose where you put a debuff on to get more HP damage up. So Dark Knight Cecil's is one that kind of like flew under the radar for me a little bit, but I do think it's a legit call you can bring just for that LD debuff. I think is actually worth it, right? Alright, so let's go ahead and look at Dark Knight Cecil here. And the first thing we'll do is we will look at the artifacts, and then we'll go ahead and we'll look at the spheres. Artifacts are pretty basic. I think there's a couple ways you can go with this guy. So he is like a damage dealer. He does dark damage. He does launching. He also is one of these characters that like self-inflicts damage to himself. So he's typically going to be at lower health levels, right? So I'd say the two routes you'd want to go, either go attack 108, max brave 330, or do attack 108, low HP attack up. So this one's if you just really want to capitalize on the attack. Basically, while he has less than 50% HP, he gets an extra 5% attack buff. I feel like the attack 108, max brave 330 is just a little bit more consistent, so I kind of like that one better. But if you like more attack, I think either of those are fine options. Either way, you want attack 108 for sure. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And then pick max brave 330 or that low HP attack up for the second one, right? And then we'll go ahead and look at the spheres. So for the spheres, the A slot, you can do attacker brave damage, which is pretty typical for a DPS character, right? However, I've said this before, with so many A sphere options, if there are some like really oddball ones or like unique ones that have specific requirements, I like to try and use those when I can, right? So a couple things is that Dark Knight Cecil does do weakness damage. So you could go with Rydia, right? Rydia would give you attack and brave damage there. The other thing you could do is, I feel like this is a really good spot for like a Renoa one. Renoa is going to be an attack max brave, which is a really nice combo to have, as long as your HP is less than 80%. So because Renoa's is a very specific one that not a lot of characters can use, I think it works very well. So this sphere is good on characters like, say, Arden or Vivi, Dark Knight Cecil, any of these characters that like self-inflict damage to their health. I think Jack does it as well. But there's not a ton of characters in the game that can like use this consistently, and because it gives good stats, I would rather use this on Dark Knight Cecil and then save my more generic spheres for other characters, right? So I would really highly recommend Renoa. Dark Knight Cecil's is also good. It's just attack and eye brave instead of attack and max brave, but that's still good also, right? So I would definitely go with one of those low HP ones. Another option I guess I would throw out there is you could do something like Noctis, which is actually like a launch sphere. Now, he doesn't launch as consistently as, say, other characters, but he does launch enough where you could get away by giving him a launch sphere. So if you wanted to give him a launch sphere, you totally could go ahead and do that. That's totally up to you, right? And then in the C slot's kind of weird for him. Because C slot is normally for like healing characters, right? And he's not really a healer, although I guess I see why they gave it to him, because he heals himself back. So his big thing is like he does damage to himself, but then he has attacks that heal his health back. But you don't really think of Dark Knight Cecil as a healer, right? So it's kind of tricky with what to put in the C slot. And you actually probably want to avoid healing spheres, because a lot of his kit operates when you're lower on health. Like, you actually don't want to be at full health with Dark Knight Cecil, which is probably why I've never liked him a lot. I don't like the feeling of being low on health and like wanting to be low on health, because he's not like Arden where he's invincible. Like, he can still die. So it's a little tricky with him, right? But you kind of want to avoid healing to keep your health low. So Elfinaud is always just like a safe C slot, right? But I think like you could do something like Cryo, which is a Brave Gain one. Now, the reason why Brave Gain works on a character like Dark Knight Cecil is because he's a launch-based character. So when you are a launch-based character, having battery is very useful for maximizing out on the launch damage. So I think something like a Cryo could actually work there, and that's not a sphere I recommend too often, but I think it could work there, right? Now on the C slot, a lot of these have to do with debuffing, right? And Dark Knight Cecil does not debuff a ton, so you could get away with putting a debuff, like one that requires a debuff, but he only debuffs on the LDR EX. Now, the EX is going to come up enough that if you give him a debuffing sphere that like lasts for like 6 turns, I think you're going to be fine. But you know, my boy Dark Knight Cecil does weakness damage, and what I've been kind of shouting out for these E-slot characters that do weakness damage, I really like Pain. I think Pain is really good here. Just you attack a target's weakness, party attack up, and then enemy attack down. I think Pain is best in slot here, to be honest. Unless you really are for like a party buff, definitely Pain is best in slot here, I think. But if you really want to maximize just on Dark Knight Cecil, I suppose then you go with like Seymour Emperor, something like that I think would be good there. I actually don't have any Seymour Emperors, but I got lots of Pains, and it works out. I think Pain is actually very good on Dark Knight Cecil. It's kind of like my standard recommendation is if you do weakness damage and you have an A slot, I like Rydia. If you have an E slot, I like Pain. They're just very, very good, right? Yeah, and then if you have a D slot, Luna Freya, that's kind of the trifecta of weakness damage spheres that are very good. So anyways, that is my sphere recommendations. Now, before we hop into the showcase, just one bonus thing. Dark Knight Cecil does have an extra weapon. He has a mannequin weapon. This can be obtained from Act 2, Chapter 5 and kind of finishing through the quest there. You'll just get this naturally through the story. You can buy additional copies through the Power Token Shop if you want extra copies for 10 Power Tokens apiece. But definitely worth leveling up. It does 10% extra Brave damage to Skill 1 and Skill 2, so very much worth it. So definitely don't be afraid to pick that one up. Let's go ahead now, and we're going to hop into a showcase. And we will see how he is looking here. I don't know. Selfie might be overkill. I might take Selfie off, actually. And actually, let's go with Rem here, because I don't want to like take away, because part of Dark Knight Cecil's kit is that he launches, right? So I don't want to like take that away by just shoving Selfie in there and having her do all the launching. So let's do it like this, and I am gonna hop into the most current Shinryu, just because I know that enemies are launchable. I'm pretty sure on my normal showcase stage that the enemies aren't launchable, right? I don't need to bring a friend here. I don't have to worry about force charging. I've got 2 like good force charging characters anyways. Rem force charges, and so does Luna Freya. So let's just hop in like this. And Dark Knight Cecil does have like a very specific way I like to open, but then after that you can kind of just play it by ear. So I'll do my basic opening for this guy, and then we'll just kind of explain the kit as we go through, right? And we have a nice single target fight that we can show him off on, which is very good, right? So what I typically like to do is I like to open with the LD, right? So let's open with the LD. This is going to be an instant turn, by the way, and you see it saps 60% of his health. Now keep in mind that when you sap your own health, it does not affect your score. So it's perfectly fine. It doesn't affect, like, it's not considered taking HP damage from an enemy. So what this attack does is an instant turn, consumes 60% of his HP. It does do a 1-turn delay on the enemies, and then it gives himself 2 buffs. Power of Darkness and Light Within Darkness. So let's do Light Within Darkness is simply a Brave regen. which is scaled off of Eye Brave. Eye Brave, I should shout out for artifacts. I do think Attack 108, Eye Brave 170 is also a decent shout because he does do a lot of battery on Eye Brave. So I would keep that in mind as an option as well. And then like for the A-Sphere, you know, I talked about Renault's Attack Max Brave, but his own is good because it's Attack Eye Brave. So if you do really want to push that Eye Brave, I think that is important, right? Then the Power of Darkness. This has a lot packed into it. So Attack up, Max Brave and Overflow stolen up, HP damage up, Dark Enchant, HP damage taken minus 10%. When you do weakness damage, you get an extra 30% Brave stolen. Very, very good, right? So a lot packed into that buff. And then this is one of the attacks that does some debuffs. So the enemies now have Dark Resist down, so that gives us our weakness damage. And then it puts the really important debuff on called New Moon Mysteries. And this is why I think his LD call is actually decent. This does a Brave Sap, which is good, but then HP damage taken plus 20%, which is really, really good, right? So we got all of that from the LD, right? Then what I like to do is to go into Valiant Blow. So let's go ahead and use Valiant Blow. And you notice that the skills change to the plus versions. There's two ways to keep the plus versions. One is being low on HP. So as long as your HP is less, well, I gotta remember what it is. Yeah, you just have to be below full HP. So as long as you're not at max HP, you get the plus version. And then what happens is after you get the EX, you get one use of each as the plus version unconditional, even if you're at full health, right? So let's do Valiant Blow Plus. All right, I'm kind of curious on the damage here. It's been a while since I've used this guy. So it does launch, and it does make other enemies launchable. So that's like his main launch. So you do have a fairly on-demand launch that you can do, right? Okay, 721k, that's fairly decent, right? So what this does is that also consumes HP. So you saw we lost HP on that. Does a dark attack. And it's way better on the plus version. We'll just put it that way. Way more damage. Does a bigger battery. Because it does battery, it just does a bigger battery based on the HP damage you deal. It initiates a launch, makes other enemies launchable, and then allies brave and HP damage plus 10% during the launch. So it actually increases your launch damage, gives himself an attack up, gives him the Power of Darkness buff, and then he also gets the Light Within Darkness buff provided you use the plus version, which we just did there. So that refreshes those two important buffs that we got on the LD, which is really, really good, right? So let's go ahead with Luna Freya, and I think what I'm going to do is we're just going to Quick Prayer on Cecil. Okay, and then I guess we'll just pop her BT attack just to make him look a little bit better, right? So from this point on, we'll just go through the rest of the attacks, but nothing too crazy here, but we'll just explain what everything does. So we're going to get this attack through, and then Rem's going to come up. And I think with Rem, I am just going to swap turns. Alright, so we got the BT effect up with Luna Freya. We will let Rem swap turns into Dark Knight Cecil. Okay. Perfect. Alright, so now we've got a free skill use. That came from Rem. So that's not from his LD. That just came from Rem. But now let's go ahead and do Darkness Plus, okay? Okay, so 700k, I mean, for a quick little button press, that's not too bad, right? So that consumes 15% of his HP, so it all takes care of his HP. Now, we are healing up because we got a lot of HP regen going right now. Does an AoE dark attack, just does more hits, basically, if it's the plus version. He gets a Max Brave up, and then once again, Power of Darkness and then Light Within Darkness, so the same two buffs. So basically, the way you want to look at it is the LD, the 15 and 35 all give him Power of Darkness and Light Within Darkness, okay? And then the 35 has an attack up, the 15 has a Max Brave up. So literally it's just kind of bounce between those attacks to upkeep the buffs, right? And then once again, it did drain some HP. Now, we do have ways to heal, right? So you see he has a Brave and an HP plus attack. So those, if you're feeling really dire, he can heal himself. So let's do an HP plus to heal. Okay, and you see we got a nice heal there. Now, with that heal, you're going to notice, so that takes us out of the plus versions of our attacks. So you got to be careful of that, because now I don't have the plus version. So now what he's got to do is he literally has to get to his EX to get his plus versions back, or you just have to simply press a button that lowers his HP again, right? So you kind of have to balance that depending on the situation. Let's go and do the AA, which is Danger Crush. Okay, so we just did a nice little dark attack there. And then he just gets an attack up and a Brave Limage up for 6 turns. So, and it does consume HP, so he did lose some HP there. So that is a great way to, like, if you're at full HP and you want the plus versions, you can press that AA, and now we're back into the plus versions again, right? So that's, I mean, that's pretty much it. What I want to do, though, is I want to get into the EX. So let's pop the LD, just because that's going to be a free instant turn, and should get us into our EX so we can show that off, right? So the EX here is called Dark Cannon, so let's go ahead and pop that. Okay, 700k. And so what we got with Dark Cannon, just a big 6-hit Brave HP attack that is dark damage. It does recover 1 skill use of its 15 and 35, so that gives him some longevity, because you know Valiant Blow has very low skill uses at 5, so you kind of want to make sure you use a Valiant Blow before you go into the EX to make sure you don't waste that recovery, right? Because that's really good. It gives him a ton of longevity there, right? And then he gets 1 unconditional use of each plus version, so once again, even if he's at full HP, he should have a plus version. So let's go ahead and try to cure. We'll get him at full HP, right? And then he should still have the plus version, so we can go ahead and test that right now. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and swap turns into him. And then even at full HP, we should have the plus versions of his attacks, right? And then once again, those same 2 buffs come on the EX, and then it just puts a Dark Imperil down, right? And you can see we still have the plus versions here, even though we're at full HP. So that's kind of what the EX does. So anyways, guys, there you go. That's Dark Knight Cecil. Pretty simple little damage dealer character. Not like the craziest thing to summon for right now, but down the road, he should get an FRBT, and then he'll be looking a lot better, right? So anyways, let me know what you guys think of Dark Knight Cecil. Thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all on the next one.